Hey guys, hope you're having a good evening. Sorry about the horrible lighting situation. I'm using light bulbs because we're on a budget. You just got off the phone with Evan Hafer, and we were talking about the prospect of interviewing Medal of Honor recipients and doing documentaries of them for the Black Rifle channel and for Mike Glover's show, which formerly known as Mike Force Podcast. I just filmed an episode today that's going to release this Friday about complacency and some of the things going on in our country. I wanted to talk about a couple of those things, but Mike Glover's show is going to be the expansion on telling stories, epic stories of survival. And it's my favorite thing to do. You know, if you've watched Black Rifle Coffee's YouTube channel, we have very specific documentaries to include veteran experiences to bear attacks. And Fieldcraft Survival has worked really hard partnering with Black Rifle to tell these stories, and it's resonated. They have millions of views, and it makes me proud to see that. But also, like, that's the future of Mike Glover's show. I want to tell stories of survival, people overcoming adversity, veteran stories, and also things that are impacting our social situations and circumstances that are hot button topics that legacy corporate corrupt media is not focusing their attention on. So I'm excited about that. I want to say thank you so much for the support. If you haven't subbed to Spotify or YouTube, I'll link it down below so you guys can subscribe, because I'm super excited about that. I'll be doing individual filmed podcasts available as Audible and YouTube, as well as interviews to include guys that like survived 9/11, guys that were in the towers when it fell, all the way to Medal of Honor recipients, which is really cool. So let's get into a couple things. Daniel Penny. Right now, it's not over for Daniel Penny, and he's been charged with some ludicrous crimes to include manslaughter. That charge, if convicted, he faces 15 years in prison, and I believe 40 years on another charge. Defense attorneys in the trial of Daniel Penny, a former Marine veteran, argued before the judge on Monday that their client was trying to prevent an attempted robbery when he put a homeless Michael Jackson impersonator, Jordan Neely, in a fatal chokehold on a New York subway last year. Now remember, this is important for you and me and everybody else who cares about protecting themselves, personal defense, being a law-abiding citizen, because this is our inherent right. We have that right to self-defense. And one of the problems I have with this is the politics of defunding police, because New York City was certainly on top, at the tip of the spear of calling for a defunding of police, being very political about it as they stripped away security from its citizens, including those who use public transportation, which, again, as a outsourcing of education, hospitals, and security, your taxpayer dollars go to protecting you via 911, via law enforcement officers who are there to serve and protect. Except if they're not there because the politicians decided to defund them, or they're so scared to do their job for fear of prosecution, then who's picking up the pieces? You and I are picking up the pieces. And then when you do defend yourself, you're faced with potential trials where you could be facing decades in prison for something that you didn't intend to do in the first place. As a reminder, Daniel Penny, veteran Marine, originally it was a race issue because they were calling him a white guy versus a black guy, even though African-American gentleman was helping Daniel Penny subdue this guy Jordan Neely, who, according to the medical examiner's first review, died of a cardiovascular event. Essentially, they lined out that this guy did not die from the chokehold. Another medical examiner came out and said, it was a female, she said he did die of the chokehold, but that was before the toxicology report got back. And as I look at the video as the potential evidence that is being used against or in his support, he's definitely restraining Jordan Neely. The question is why? Well, the answer is there are no law enforcement officers in the area protecting people who were dealing with a man that was not only mentally deranged, but was on drugs, according to the toxicology report, and said he was going to kill everybody on board the train, where witnesses that testified on behalf of Daniel Penny said they were in fear for their life. And so, again, you have an inherent right to self-preservation and defense. And when you're protecting other people, the same rules apply. Just like a law enforcement officer who would be protecting somebody from bodily harm and the risk of death. It's not just injury, it's death. And so he was saying, I'm going to kill you. And he put this guy in a restraint or a hold. The guy had a pulse when law enforcement officers originally arrived. They transport him to a medical facility, a hospital, where he passes away. Okay, this is verbatim what Neely said. He said, in quotations, I'm ready to die, and he would kill a mother effer, and the other riders were scared. One of the passengers was Daniel Penny, who was 24 years old, and Penny put Neely in a hold, not a choke hold, a restraint hold that lasted 6 minutes. Now, again, when the officers arrived, he had a pulse. The hold that you see is what appears to be a rear naked choke. And me and Annie Stump talk about this on a episode of Focal Point. If you're not subscribed, I'll link it down below. But the gist of it is, if you're holding somebody in a rear naked choke and you know what you're doing, and I would assume Daniel Penny has extensive combatives experience and knows what he's doing, he's holding both his forearm and his bicep across the jugular veins of his neck, right? That arterial path is transporting blood and oxygen to the brain. When you basically put somebody in a hold there, you could make them pass out and you render them unconscious. When you're preventing somebody from breathing by crushing their windpipe, by literally choking them with your hand or your arm, you have it across their windpipe and you're cutting off pure oxygen to all the systems, and you're basically shutting them down. It takes a longer time to shut them down. Now, he was holding them for 6 minutes. When they interviewed Daniel Penny, they interrogated him, the police officers did, for 45 minutes. When they were interrogating him, during his line of questioning, he didn't know, police officers knew, he didn't know at the time that Jordan Neely had passed away. And so what did he say? He said, hey, I tried to hold him because he was threatening passengers' lives. And he even said, as a Marine, I feel like that was my responsibility, and he did that. In this article that I'm reading, it even says a white man, Penny, put Neely in a hold that lasted 6 minutes. Afterward, Neely, 30 years old, was rushed to the hospital and declared dead. Penny went to a police precinct where his statement kicked off a legal case that's ongoing right now in Manhattan. They found guilty of second-degree manslaughter, which is his charge, and his secondary charge is criminally negligent homicide. He could face up to 15 years in prison. The case of Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely isn't just another sad story. It's the city afflicted with homelessness and crime. Okay? Why do we have homelessness and crime? Because of radical politicians' not only views, but their policy. Also on this, over the past month, they say it's expected to go to a jury next week. This is next week. It's going to set a legal precedent, like the Kyle Rittenhouse situation, for the use of self-defense, good Samaritans, responsible citizens protecting themselves or other people around them. I just recently watched a video of an officer-involved shooting where an officer arrives on scene. There's a suspect that's inside of the house who's screaming, and he comes out of the house. This is an officer who had an interaction the morning of the same day with the same person that had a drug problem. He comes out, and the officer, which is good policing, is trying to reduce the risk to himself and calmed the suspect down by saying, hey, like, you remember me, like I was dealing with you this morning. Everything's cool. Everything's all right. The guy comes out and he says, I'm going to kill you. He's butt naked and he's covered in what appears to be mud or feces or some brown material. He says he's going to kill the officer, runs towards him. The officer draws his pistol and winds up using deadly force and putting the suspect down. And when questioned, the officer said that he didn't have enough time to get to a less lethal option. And so he drew his pistol, told him to stop, and then he used deadly force. Now, when you look at the case, you ask, hey, was it reasonable that this officer thought his life was in danger? The guy said he was going to kill him. He was running at him naked, covered in feces. This guy, Neely, was saying he scared the living daylights out of everybody, one passenger said in quotations. When he boarded the train, paramedics attempt to revive him after the event, but all of the people around were giving their witness statements saying they were in fear for their life. One lady said she was frozen in place and she was so scared she couldn't even talk because she thought she was going to die. So what is the correlation? We have one situation where an officer, by his protocol and process, is using deadly force to protect himself and other people around him. Daniel Penny was doing the same. This guy declared out loud with not only his behavior, but his speech that he was going to kill everybody on the train. He restrained him because there was no officer present. He didn't die in Daniel Penny's arms. He died later at a hospital. When asked by the medical examiner, it was because of the drugs in his system and likely like a cardiovascular event. And that's a lot of good information for us to make an assumption about the direction this goes. Except we live in bizarro world. We live in upside down world. Now, the reason I make issue of this case is because this is the same exact reason why Good Samaritans bypass people in distress. This is the exact same reason and culture that's ingrained now in law enforcement, where they don't want to get involved or are afraid of doing their job because they're afraid of going to prison for the rest of their life. Now, I have my own personal opinions about qualified immunity and officers' duties and responsibilities according to even like Utah statute, where they're giving like basically full reign to do whatever they want. It even says in the Utah statute that not only can they do what they want, but they could intentionally do whatever they want, and they're still immune from liability. I don't agree with that. Like if an officer is neglecting his own duties by doing something malice and intent or committing a crime, he should be convicted like anybody else. Just because he's in the conduct of his duties as an officer doesn't mean he should be protected and immune. Some states call it qualified immunities, but there's statutes in different degrees and different levels that give him more protections. And so I personally think that that's an issue in the country because we're not incentivizing officers with good moral integrity to do the right thing if there's no consequence for their actions. On the other hand, if we're putting every officer in prison for doing their job, especially when using deadly force that they think is the right amount of force to save their life or somebody else's life based on what they perceive, that's also bad. It's a conundrum, and it's an issue that we need to discuss and talk about. The last component of this is what precedent it's going to set forward if he gets convicted. If he gets convicted as a responsible citizen, you are likely not going to get involved at all. And then even the way I train personal defense, how our like today I did a 3-part. It's going to be an 8-part, but I did 3 parts of it for the Fieldcraft Survival app on home defense. We talk about center fed, corner fed, interior doors, inward facing, outward facing. And we talked about considerations in home defense. I am going to restructure how I communicate about all of these things, including how you interoperate or how you communicate to law enforcement after the fact, because this is going to set a precedent across especially radical attorneys who decide to bring a case against a law-abiding citizen protecting other people's lives. So let me know what you think in the comments below, whether or not you think this is going to be a case that's going to end up in a guilty verdict with Daniel Penny. I don't know what to think. The jury is going to weigh in on this, but man, it's New York City. Who knows? Who knows? And I personally think Daniel Penny's a hero. He shouldn't be prosecuted on anything. He should be doing a press conference with government officials and them recognizing his bravery against a deranged and drug-induced person that was threatening people's lives. I mean, it's bizarre world. Lastly, I filmed the Mike Glover show, and one of the elements that we talked about was complacency. That airs this Friday. Also, we talked about the prospect of what was going to happen in this nation when we start mass deporting, especially illegal immigrants who have committed crimes, at the same time that we designated cartels terrorist organizations. Me and Greg Lappin on an episode of Team Room, which is on the Fieldcraft Survival channel, talked about it. And Greg Lappin that was on Andy Frisella's show on, it's Real AF, and you know what the AF stands for. Andy Frisella's show, they talk about the intel that they heard about of potential malice, bad actors that have been intentionally, deliberately infiltrated into the country. That number is around 10 to 20 million people. A lot of my Patreon members on Patreon are asking me, Mike, is this something we need to be concerned about? My answer is yes. If we are mass deporting illegal immigrants who have committed crimes, those are criminals. The complexity in it is you already have governors and mayors, chiefs of police that have said, we will not allow the federal government to come in and deport anybody because we're concerned about our citizens. So you weren't concerned when it came to illegals coming in and killing innocent civilians like Lake and Riley, but now all of a sudden you're concerned about your citizens and you're going to prevent the federal government from coming in and deporting criminals? Okay, so there's going to be chaos and calamity there. The second phase of that, and it might be intertwined, is if we deem cartels terrorist organizations, how many cartel members are present in existing networks that use RICO mandates or RICO law where they don't have the motivation nor the manpower to go after these people because it's illegal to be in the country and be a member of a cartel or supporting a cartel? Except if you talk to any gang unit and any law enforcement agency across the country, they're infiltrated with those gang members that belong to cartels. What happens when overnight they're designated terrorists and we're using DOD assets, 17 plus organizations in the IC, like the NSA, NRO, and CIA, to target offensively these guys? Well, you get a situation where they say, we're going to wage war. And then you get these embedded infiltrators. Just take a small percentage of 20 million. It's still a large number. And you get chaos. You get this intel that was leaked. I won't spoil it because we go into it in detail on the Team Room show on Fieldcraft Survival's YouTube channel. But we talk about it would be a strategic attack across the country, basically by attacking rural schools that are less guarded with smaller departments that don't even have the capacity nor capability to respond. So what do you do then when the entire country locks down everything, where you have roadblocks, you have cities, towns, and even states locking their borders because they're afraid of what's going to take place with illegal infiltrators turning the tides? And I don't want to fearmonger and scare the hell out of everybody, but it's something that we should discuss because as it happens after January 20th, starting January 21st, where the governor of Colorado, guys, came out and stated that he will use Denver police officers to prevent federal agents from coming in and taking away criminals. I hate to say it, but actually I don't hate to say it. I love to say it. I hate that people are so offended by it. If you enter in this country illegally, you're a criminal. You've done something already illegal. especially in phase one where it's illegal immigrants that have committed crimes. So if a federal agent from ICE shows up and says, we want to go into your jail and take all the illegals that have committed crimes out of your jail and deport them, and the governor of Colorado is telling Denver police officers to prevent them, well, if you want to be a member of the Gestapo, then yeah, get on that bandwagon and see what happens to you. If you want to be on the right side of history, then get the hell out of the way and realize you shouldn't be preventing the national security and sovereignty of our nation by defending and protecting the radical ideology of a radical governor who all of a sudden cares about his citizens. You didn't care when in Denver, BLM and Antifa are throwing pipe bombs at officers, that I know for a fact happened, because Matt Vanny and Matt Shea are officers in that area that worked in that area, that worked for Fieldcraft Survival. You can't tell me because I saw the pictures. So all of a sudden you care about the citizens of Colorado? Well, I don't think so. That's the crap sandwich that we're going to be handed soon. I'm off to the underground to talk more about this kind of unsuppressed on patreon.com/Mike Glover. I appreciate you guys. Till next time, peace out.